Okay.
my mic on
we
yet?
need you to do one thing for us before we start. So, Raina.
Yeah. I want to take a selfie with you guys.
Yeah.
So, I always put these up on Instagram, so if you have the book in your hands, doesn't matter which book, hold it up.
Stand up, right? Stand up.
Yeah.
Everybody, stand up.
And then make yourself look as excited as you possibly can. Are you ready?
Wow, look at all those
Okay.
books. Oh my God. I want to look at this selfie before we take the selfie. Come over here.
I know.
All right. All right. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Woo. Nice work. That is going to go out to millions of people around the world on Raina's Twitter and Instagram.
Or thousands.
Thousands. Well, welcome everybody. It's so wonderful to see so many of you and so many kids, so many teens and kids and folks in the audience. It's really awesome and so exciting to be here with Raina Telgemeier. How exciting is it to see Raina Telgemeier in person? So we're going to do something. I don't know if kids in the audience know a show I do called How I Built This, but some of the grown-ups might. And what I do on that show is I talk about people's lives, like, from the very beginning to where they are now. So we're going to do a little bit of that with Raina. Some of you might know her story, but some of you might not. So I thought we would start here in San Francisco. This is actually where you grew up. This is your hometown.
I was born across the street at the Kaiser on Geary. I'm like 0.03 miles away from my birthplace. Yeah.
Wow. And of course, we know some of your childhood from your books, about your childhood from your books, but you grew up here in San Francisco. And what was it like as a kid here in the city in the, at that time, in the 80s? And
I mean, it was the late 70s, early 80s when I was a kid. So it was like the days of free love and, understanding, and everybody was in a very peaceful space. But it was also war was brewing overseas, and I didn't really know that much about it. So it was this clashing of hippie happiness plus foreboding, the world might end soon.
Yeah.
And in the midst of all that, I went to Lakeshore Elementary School. Any takers in the audience? I can't see you guys, so I'm going to assume that some of you know where that is. And I grew up in Park Merced, which is over by San Francisco State. And so that was my part of the city, right by the ocean, right by the beach, right where the fog never leaves. And so there is something that happens when you grow up in the fog, which is that there are no seasons. Mm-hmm. The seasons never change. And so when I started making books about my childhood, one of the notes that I got from my editor was, Raina, it's really hard to tell the passage of time. How much time has passed between the first part of the story and the middle and the end or whatever. And I was like, San Francisco, that's how it felt. But I've always been pretty good at marking my life with stories and with events that have happened to me, and my parents were fortunately really good with taking photographs, and they were also great about keeping a lot of the art that I did when I was a kid. So I do have these little physical touchstones that I can look back on and say, oh, that must have happened when I was about 5 years old, or oh, we went to this camping trip when I was 7, and so I've had a pretty good way to look back on my life.
we have obviously a window into what you were like as a kid. Some of a window from some of your books. I mean, tell us a little bit more about what you were like as a kid. Were you gregarious? Were you outgoing? Was it easy for you to make friends? Were you sometimes introverted and lonely?
I think I was all of the above.
Huh.
And so you've heard of introverts, which are the people that recharge kind of on their own, doing quiet things, and extroverts who get their energy from being around other people. And I think I'm an ambivert, which is right in the center. I'm also a Gemini, so I think I've just always had two personalities. But yeah, I needed both. I needed to have a group of friends, and I had quite a lot of friends when I was growing up. It was nice. I lived in a community with lots of like backyards and a lot of neighborhood kids, and then I had my friends at school. But every day I had to draw, and for me, drawing is a pretty solitary activity.
When did you start doing that?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't remember. It was that long ago. But
you
like
just always drew?
I think so.
From the time, like always from when you were a little kid?
Did you draw when you were a kid?
Always doodled, and I still doodle. I'm doodling on this piece of paper right now.
Oh, cool.
But did you, I mean, that was just something you did? It was drawing. It wasn't like sort of abstract painting or anything like that?
It was pretty abstract when I was 1.
Okay.
With the, oh, here's an orange crayon, here's a green crayon. But yeah, I mean, my mom and dad saved all of those drawings. And so you can sort of see the progression between scribbles, and then I must have been watching cartoons on TV because you can start to see them turn into shapes that look more like humanoid characters. And then just kind of it progressed as I went. But I don't remember a time before I started drawing. I always remember it was just something that I liked to do. And so as like a elementary school, middle school kid, it sort of became my identity. What are you? Who are you? Raina's the artist.
Oh, wow.
So I was kind of classified early on in my career as a child by being...
You were the artist. What was your sister?
She was also the artist.
She was the artist.
Yeah, so that created a little tension. Because, so my sister's 5 years younger than I am, and that meant that she had a role model. She had somebody who was already doing something she liked to do, and we did it together. And I think the second kid benefits from that. They have somebody older that they can kind of latch onto what they're doing. And so her drawings were way better than mine. So when she was 2 and I was 7, her drawings were as good as mine had been when I was 5.
Wow.
And she started like winning contests, and contests that I had gotten like honorable mention in. My sister would win first place, and she'd get a free trip to Great America.
Wow. I do not remember this in Sisters, actually.
No, that's not the whole story.
Okay, yeah.
And that's true of all my books. I mean, I put relevant stories into my books.
Yeah.
So if I'm telling a story about my teeth, most of the details that go into that story itself are about my teeth. And my new book, Guts, which comes out in September, is going to focus more on, well, I don't know, am I spoiling it by talking about it now?
Yeah, we'll talk about it, but it's okay. You can mention it. Yeah.
Well, it's about fear, it's about anxiety, it's about food, it's about phobias, it's about a lot of stuff that I know some kids are going to be able to relate to. And so I tell the story of like my family's food preferences and how we were really picky and like the kinds of things we like to eat for dinner. And so you won't see that in my other books because it wasn't part of that story.
Right.
But there are always little callbacks, and I think that overall I'm sort of telling this larger and richer picture of the more books that I do.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have done that starting out.
So as a kid, you are already sort of identified and self-identify as an artist from an early age. You show talent. You're maybe not as talented as your sister Mara.
No.
But you're showing some talent. And by the time you got to like middle school, was it something you did every day? Like, did you have a space in your room where you... Can you describe what your art space in your room was like?
Yeah, it was a desk with a light on it.
Oh, wow.
And I think it had a drawer on the side. Like, it wasn't fancy at all.
But you had like
I did.
big pieces of paper?
Yeah, we always had...
Colored pencils? Or?
Oh, yes. Colored pencils, crayons. I was very fond of markers when I was in middle school and high school. But I started making comics when I was 10.
Wow.
I started reading them at 9, and I started making my own at 10, so I sort of left everything else behind once I found comics. I had been doing, like illustrations and big displays and posters, and my art was all over the place. I just drew whatever I wanted to. But as soon as I discovered comics, I started telling specifically stories about characters who looked a lot like me and my family, a lot like me and my friends. One of my favorite comic strips is For Better or For Worse by Lynn Johnston.
Yeah.
And that was a slice of life humor strip about a family. And it just became my number one like inspiration and kind of guidepost. And I started, tracing her art and copying her art and trying to make my characters look like hers. And what she did was just do, small moments and interactions between the family members. So my comic strips looked just like that.
I love that as an influence because so many comic writers refer to Calvin and Hobbes.
I'm not, yes,
right?
Me too.
It's all right, always Calvin, which is a great comic. But For Better or Worse, that's more obscure. But you can see the connection. A lot of kids here might not know that comic, but it really was that kind of iconic strip in that way.
Yes, and the most unique thing about For Better or For Worse is it started in 1979 and it went for 29 years, and the characters all grew up in real time. during those 29 years. So Michael and Elizabeth, who were the children in that family, were the same age as me and my sister. So it was like we grew up together. And it was like they were my next door neighbors. And I felt like I knew them so personally because I got to get inside of their heads and know their thoughts. So, I mean, I didn't intentionally model my work after Lynn's, but I think it's a very clear connection when you look at them side by side. And so I was making comic strips as a 5th grader, 6th grader, but I was also writing in a diary every day. And it wasn't long before I started illustrating the entries in my
your diary.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I never showed them to anybody. But I mean, I did it for 20 years, and it was amazing daily practice. And that is what I do.
By the way, this is just as an aside. A lot of people, I'm sure, ask you, Raina, how do I become a good artist, or how do I become a good storyteller? That's the way to do it. It's like, how do I become an NBA player? You stand at the free throw line and you throw 20,000 baskets, and you miss most of them until you start making them.
Yeah.
That's how you become an author illustrator.
But most people don't say, can we see those 20,000 baskets? Can you show them to us?
Right.
Did you give them all on video to see like how horrible you were as a basketball player?
Right.
When you're an artist, you have physical proof of how bad you were.
Yeah.
So I plan to show it all at some point.
But you have to go, right, this is important. You have to go through a phase where you're bad at it for a long time before you get good at it.
And that's true. I don't know if it's helpful to tell yourself that you're bad at it. I think that you might think that, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't show it to other people. I think it's still okay to share. It's still okay to say, like, I'm practicing, I'm working on this, I'm trying to get better, and the more you do, the better you get. But I think we do have a tendency to look at what we are doing and say this isn't good enough.
Yeah.
But for me, I was doing it because I loved it, not because I thought it was good or bad. And I was interested enough in the craft of comics to try and understand them better and to try to apply what I was learning. There's a really, really good book called Understanding Comics by Scott Mccloud. And I don't know if it would hit everybody at 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old, the way that it hit me at like age 16, but that's when I read that book. And it just blew my mind with how much nuts and bolts, nitty gritty stuff there is to learn about the medium. And I've always kind of been fascinated about what goes on behind the scenes with making comics as well as just making them.
So you, obviously, you're in high school, you go off to art school.
Yeah.
It was clear at that point that this was going to be this is the thing you were going to do? You were going to become an artist?
I hoped so.
You'd hope so.
The problem was, so I graduated from Lowell High School in 1995, and then didn't go to art school until 1999. I had 4 years in between, and I went to the City College of San Francisco in that time. I'm just dropping names here. That's really what Aptus Middle School. I didn't mention that one. That's what being in San Francisco is all about.
Yep.
So in those 4 years in between high school and college, I had a chance to kind of figure out what I wanted to do, and I had a really, really awesome drawing teacher at CCSF, and I wasn't sure like what direction I was going to go in, and part of the problem was, yes, I knew I wanted to be a cartoonist, but at the time, the only real channels available were to work for Marvel and DC and make superhero comic books, or to be a comic strip artist like Calvin and Hobbes, like For Better or For Worse.
Right.
And neither of those two things were quite right. If somebody had told me, you can basically make long-form diary comics that are going to be printed and as books and like sold in bookstores and book fairs, I would have said, well, that's the job for me. I'm not even going to try anything else.
But that whole genre didn't exist.
No. My publisher didn't start publishing comics until 2005.
Yeah.
So I had to figure it out. And what I did in the meantime was just to self-publish. I just printed my own stuff and just kind of put it out there. That means I put stuff up on the web. I made mini comics and took them to art shows, and I sold stuff on my website. Like I was just like, I know I want to do this, but I don't know how.
So writing a comic strip wasn't the thing that you felt was right for you. That wasn't the story you wanted to tell. And you didn't want to do Marvel Comics.
Right.
Which was interesting. I'm sure you're a fan. I mean, we just talked about Comics Day, National Comics Day yesterday, or Free Comics Day.
Free Comic Book Day was yesterday.
Free Comic Book Day.
Yeah.
That wasn't what you wanted to do either. You wanted to do something in between, or maybe beyond that, which was taking the comic strip concept, but turning it into a story that didn't have to have a punchline or a joke, but that was a story.
That was really important.
And there was nothing like that. Do you remember when you first saw something like that and you thought, wait a minute, this is what I want to do? Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, it was Bone by Jeff Smith.
Huh.
And he was a self-publisher. He was publishing Bone himself starting in the early 90s, and he just kept doing it every month. And then eventually Scholastic was the publisher of Bone. They reprinted Bone as a full-color graphic novel series. And I think the first time I read Bone, it was as a graphic novel. Like it was bound into a book. And I had about 10 people tell me before I read it, you're going to love this, you're going to read this, you need to read this book. And I was like, nah, whatever. And then when I finally did, I was like, whoops, they were right. Sometimes your friends know more about you than about yourself. But that was true with Bone. And it was just something about that format that there was space. There was space for quiet moments. There was space for action. There was space for humor. There was space for really like developed relationships and also beautiful artwork. If you guys haven't read Bone by Jeff Smith, it's so beautiful to look at. So that lit a light bulb in my head that I'm very grateful for.
Yeah.
And by the time I got out of school, I was ready to go, but I didn't have a publisher yet. I was just kind of freeform.
Yeah. And for a long time, and you were sort of, as you alluded to, you self-published. You put things up on the web. I mean, Smile began as a weekly panel, right?
That's
it was
right.
Just one panel
It was
every
one
week?
page every week.
One page every week.
Yeah.
And you just put it online.
Yep.
And it was just a thing you did, and no one was paying you for it.
No.
So how did that thing that you started out as just a fun project, how did that then get to Scholastic Graphics, their imprint, to become a book?
So I started Smile in 2004, and it was on this website called girlamatic.com, which was girl-friendly comics, and at the time that was a big deal. And at the same time, my mini comics had gotten the attention of the people at Scholastic who were just starting up the graphics imprint. So they asked me to work with them, but Smile was in its infancy, and so they ended up publishing the Babysitter's Club graphic novels.
Right.
So that was my first published project.
That was your first book, The Babysitter,
yes.
right.
And so those books were published from 2006 to, I'm talking too quickly and getting so excited, 2008, diction. And then after that, the recession happened and some other stuff happened, and so I wasn't sure what was going to come next. But all that while, I had been putting up pages of Smile. One a week, the story grew, people started to get interested in it, and Scholastic said, okay, well, let's take a chance and let's put out your book.
So and that was it.
That was it.
So that was it. You put this book out in 2008. I think around that time, or maybe in the years just preceding that, you still had a day job. You were working as like an editorial assistant at a publishing company in New York?
I was, yeah. I worked for a publisher called Stewart, DeBory and Chang. They are the sister company to Abrams, who is now like a big publisher. They're the publishers of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series and El Defo by C.C. Bell and like a bunch of other cool.
But that was your day job. That was to
my
pay
day
your
job.
rent.
Yeah.
Drawing cartoons. That was your passion at night.
I was busy pretty much full time. I would go to work for 8 hours, and then come home and make comics until I crashed.
Wow.
And I didn't have an air conditioner either. So in the summer times, this was in New York City, like it was really hot. And so I would sometimes sleep for like 4 or 5 hours and then just be like, I'm just gonna go to the office now, really, really early, because they have air conditioning. So.
Yeah. So Smile is published in
2010.
2010.
Yeah.
And it's a rocket. It's a total, right?
Yeah.
It's a rocket. It's a phenomenon. It is.
Wait, pause. It was kind of a rocket.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. Because it came out and the initial book fairs orders was big. So kids had access to Smile at the school. They would go to their book fairs. They would be like, oh, this cool comic thing. I've never seen anything like it. Okay. So kids' word of mouth was strong from the get-go. Took grown-ups a while to catch up. So you could go into a comic store, you could go into a bookstore and be like, hey, do you have a copy of Smile? And they'd be like, what is that? Is that like some self-help adult nonfiction book? It wasn't for another year and a half until it hit the New York Times bestseller list.
Wow.
Year and a half.
But then it never left.
It never left, no. It left when they canceled the comics part of the New York Times bestseller list.
Oh, I see, okay.
Because they were like, boy, Raina's just been on this thing
Forever. Raina's at the top.
I had 8 books out by the time they
Oh
canceled
my
it. So it would be like, 8 bestsellers and then like 2 other people that would, other people.
And it's followed then, of course, by Sisters and drama and other books in between. And we'll get to some of that when we get Q&A here, because I'd love to hear from the kids in this audience, both the boys and the girls, and anyone in the audience about what it is about Raina's work that speaks to them, because there's something very visceral. As you know, I have 2 boys. Raina came to our Hanukkah party last year, and she came in and no one knew who she was, and I happened to whisper to a couple of kids, "That's Raina Telgemeier." And she was mobbed. 30 kids mobbed Raina in my kitchen and didn't let her leave for 2 hours.
I did get to eat brisket, though.
You did get to eat brisket.
That was pretty fun.
Kids were like almost crying. They were so happy to talk to you, my kids. And so there's something about those books that just spoke to kids, and it really did create this boom in graphic novels for kids. And a lot of that credit goes to you. I mean, we should applaud that, guys. That is...
Thanks.
How do you, you were working at a publishing house, you were toiling away in obscurity. You're a really famous kids author today. How has that must have changed your life in huge ways?
Yeah, and yes and no, because I still toil away in obscurity 8 months out of the year. That's still my job. And so those other 4 months are spent on stages and meeting people and being on social media, and just having a public persona is not something I ever thought would be a part of being a writer. So that's been a huge surprise, and just kind of learning the kinds of things I want to talk about when I'm on a stage, and the kinds of other projects that I want to work on. And yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot that I didn't even think existed before I got started. And so as far as like the boom is partly thanks to me. There's a lot of other people that are responsible for the boom too, and it's nice to have peers.
Yeah.
That's one of the fun things, is meeting other like-minded cartoonists and illustrators and authors and folks who do what I do, and having just like a water cooler experience where we can talk about our jobs and about how we're feeling. And the work that I do it's pretty introspective. It's about reaching really deep inside to find those crunchy memories and those sticky ones that have something to them that I want to talk about. It can be draining.
Yeah.
It can be exhausting to have to do that over and over again. And so after I've finished a book, I feel like I weigh 50 pounds less than I did when I started. I feel amazing.
Yeah.
It's like I've closed that book. I've closed that chapter of my life, and now I can move on and think about other stuff. And then I go on stage and everybody wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
So what was it really like
Yeah.
when you lost those 2 front teeth of yours?
Right.
And then I have to live it all over again.
Right.
But you get better at that the more you do it. And I really enjoy being able to connect with readers, because they're seeing that experience for the first time. They might be seeing something that reflects their own life for the first time, and it's really powerful.
I'm sure a lot of kids in this audience, they read those books and they say, "That's me, that's my story." Like my son read Sisters and said, "That's me and my brother."
That's so
right?
cool.
And I'm sure some of the boys in here have similar stories. What you may not know is that once you get to our age, your memory shrinks. You don't remember things as much as you do when you're a kid. And so what's remarkable about your books is the rich detail and the memories. How do you trigger your memories? How do you bring them back? What are some of the things you do to remember those moments that you can write about and illustrate?
Like I said, I'm lucky that I have access to my old artwork and to old photos and books that I read when I was younger, songs that I was a fan of, movies that I liked. All I have to do is put one on, and it's like it all comes rushing back.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll do that. I'll dig into Spotify and just punch in 1986 or something and see what comes back to me. And a lot of times it's stuff that I've already sort of put through the wheels, but sometimes it surprises me. And I feel like anybody can do that, but I've gotten pretty good at it. I've just sort of been flexing this muscle for a really long time. But I'll ask you in return, do you have any really essential childhood memories that that you feel like became such a part of you that you could ever tell a story about, or that have led to the work that you do?
Oh yeah, I mean all the time. And my kids ask me. It's funny because my kids ask me to tell them funny stories about me when I was a kid.
Funny ones.
But the problem is that I was not a funny kid. I was a very serious child. I don't know if any kids here have heard Wow in the World, our podcast. You've heard Wow in the World? Well, I am exactly that character in real life. If you've heard Wow in the World, that is who I am.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, digging back, when you dig back into those moments and you realize, when you're a kid, you have these moments of anxiety and fear that you now see and understand better, and why they may not have been rational, or you can understand them better and more intensely, and you really capture that. And in this, now I think is a chance to talk about this book about Guts coming out in the fall,
goodness.
which in some ways is your most personal book, right?
It is, and that's saying something, because all of my books have been my most personal book. But it's about stuff I've not been able to talk about until now. And I think just to kind of go back to something you were talking about before, I feel like it's really important when I am writing my books to not let my current voice slip in too much. So that's one thing I do, is I try to keep my own opinion out of it. I try to just remember what 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 14-year-old
Almost
me
like
felt.
an out-of-body experience. You're looking at Raina, you're just the reporter taking notes.
And sometimes it's just a matter of like the type of writing I'm doing. So just like as far as narrative goes, if you've read Smile, there is a narrator. There are caption boxes that say things like, the next day, or I was feeling really worried in that moment. But in Sisters, I decided to try telling a story without the captions. So there's no narrator in Sisters. And I think that makes the two works feel a little bit different. But I went back to narration for Guts because I felt like it was important to sort of contextualize the things that I went to. And specifically what I went through was I started having panic attacks when I was 9 years old, and I started seeing a therapist, and was pretty ashamed of that and didn't want to talk to people about it. I don't know if it was the time in our culture that it was a little bit more
People
taboo.
just didn't talk about it.
People didn't talk about it as much as they do now, and I think we're really lucky. But so I sat down and just wrote the script. I wrote the script from my own head and my own memories, and just put down everything that I could remember onto the page. But then we had a therapist read it and say, well, this is what a therapist might have said in the 80s, but this is how they would say the same thing now. So we don't want to confuse the reader. I want my reader to have a pretty close experience with reading this story. So whether it's my full memory talking, or my memory that's been altered a little bit by like adults and being an adult and talking with adults now.
Right.
So people often ask like, what percentage of your book is true? And I say it's probably about 90-10. Like, the story is true, everything that happens in the story is true, but there is maybe 10% of like the adult author who's contextualizing stuff that goes into the final product. But I don't want you to know that when you're reading it. I don't want you to feel that when you're reading. I want you to feel like you're there, you're in it. So I can't remember what the first part of the question was.
No,
but
just to tell us about. I mean, I'm super excited for this book to come out. I'm sure you guys are excited for this book to come out in September. I'm just curious. I'm just curious. Just curious. Show of cheers. I'm just going to say a couple of Raina's titles and tell me which one you love the best.
Oh
all right?
my God, what if one of them is hated by everybody?
No, they won't. All right, who's here? Who's a Smile person here? All right. Who is a Sisters person? Drama? Any drama? Ghosts?
I've never done this before.
Wow, that's awesome.
I've never done the reader thing.
That's so cool.
I think Sisters might have gotten the loudest cheer.
Go Sisters.
Yeah.
It was close. I asked my kids that today, so I got a Sisters and I got a Ghosts. Yeah. There you go.
I'll make a chart. And
well, we are also here to talk about a new project that you have, and I know a lot of you guys have this book out in your hands. Share Your Smile.
Yeah.
This is an interactive guide for kids to help them tell their own stories.
Yeah.
It's a way to kind of help kids become, you, or if they want to become you. Tell us about this book and how that came about.
So it kind of came from just these events that I do and these Q&As that I do, and I get a lot of fan mail, and one of the things people always want to know is, where do you begin? How do you make comics? How do you get better at making comics?
Yeah.
And what are the things that you've done in your life to become who you are? And so this book is about demystifying the process a little bit and just goes into my thought process. How do I come up with ideas, and how do I take real life events and turn them into stories? How do I world build? And so it's just about like kind of looking at the world around you and then writing things down and using what you've written down to create a story. Whether it's true with like some fantasy, whether it's totally true, whether you decide to make your characters animals, but they have the same name as you and your friends, that's not important. It's more about what you want to do. And so this was just a way to show people and also tell. And I think that's what cartoonists do the best, is I could tell you how to be a cartoonist, but I can also show you, and I can give you some templates and some pages to practice on. And
Do you think that you'd be willing to give us a brief demonstration?
A brief
just
one?
a brief demonstration of maybe how to draw a comic? That wasn't hard.
No.
Yeah.
I'm willing to do a brief demo. So I have a program on my iPad called Procreate, and it's really cool. I have like a digital pencil that I can draw with, and you just draw right on the screen, and it appears on the screen. They're both screens. Weird. Okay. So let's see. I haven't actually come up with an idea for what I'm going to draw yet. So I want some audience participation. I need an idea for a place and two objects, and they should be totally unrelated. So we'll start with a place. I see your hand up. Yes. What's a place that I could draw?
I forgot. What, do you have a place?
Yeah.
The
The
forest.
forest. I
You got
love
the
it.
forest.
Okay, now two objects that are completely unrelated to being in a forest. Do you see people
How about you
die?
right there? Yeah.
Yeah.
A washing machine.
A
washing machine. Wonderful.
Forest and a washing machine, and right up there,
A bear.
a bear. A forest, a washing machine, and a bear.
Okay. And I'm not gonna, I don't know, sometimes I make comics based on the ideas. I'm just gonna like draw those things, I think, into a scene. So what I do when I'm working on my comics is I usually sketch really lightly first. And I'm gonna make that a little bit. So this is what I call a thumbnail, which just means a sketchy version of my drawing. And it's just like little stick figures, and it helps me kind of figure out where everything's gonna fit, and if I need to redraw stuff, it's not that big of a deal. So I'm gonna draw my own character kind of coming into a scene, carrying a laundry basket, and let's see, a washing machine. And no, I don't think I've ever drawn a washing machine before. So this is a really great practice run for when I do my washing machine comic someday. Actually, I don't know if you guys have read this book. It's called Sheets. It's a graphic novel about a ghost, and it's got a cover with a really nicely drawn washing machine on it. And every time I see that book, I stare at it, and I'm like, man, Brenna really drew good washing machines. But I bet she looked at reference. So that's not what I'm doing today. I'm not looking at actual reference. I'm just trying to remember.
Whoa.
So, I mean, this is the thing that's cool about thumbnails, is that even though I'm not spending a whole lot of time on the finished artwork, you can kind of see what's happening. You can kind of get a sense of what I'm drawing. So when I do my books, I hand my editor basically a whole book that looks like this. And it's got, let's see, I'll draw in a little word balloon. Okay, so they're in a forest. That's easy. Yeah, so I didn't know what I was going to do, and you guys helped me come up with an idea. So yeah, you can see this. I'm going to add another layer to this drawing, and I'm going to use a different tool to ink over this, and I will change my color. And this is a program that you can get for an iPad that doesn't cost very much, but it's really fun to play around with. So if you have access to an iPad or drawing software, I highly recommend it.
What's the program called?
It's called Procreate.
Procreate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so now I'm using more of like an inking tool, and now I'm going to go over my sketchy lines with what looks like a pen. And then that's going to make it look a little bit more like my finished artwork. So while I'm doing this, while I'm inking my drawing, Guy, do you want to ask a couple more questions? Do you want to see if the audience has
I'm really curious to hear from these guys.
Yeah, me
Raina.
too.
Let's take a couple questions from the audience. And then, do we have a microphone, or is it better for me to repeat those questions? We do have a microphone. So wait for a microphone to get to you, and I promise we'll get to you. We got a lot. So let's start with some questions. All right, I'm going to take stock of questions. We have a question right down here. Let's start with this question. And this is right here for Raina. Yes.
In Smile, when at the end, when your friends, when you're in high school and your friends are there, the girls who pants you, are they all at what school are you at?
What school are you at?
Are you going to go get my yearbook and like look them up? Wait, what? Sorry.
when, at the end of Smile, when the girls pants
Yeah.
you, what school are you at?
I was at Lowell.
At Lowell, okay. She was at Lowell.
Hopefully, everybody, Lowell's really nice these days, and no one pantses anybody.
All right, let's come around this way.
Also, I was wearing biker shorts underneath that.
Bike,
thing,
you
so
are, okay. Well,
yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Come around this way. Do you have a question here? We'll just wait for the microphone.
My aunt, she works with Kelly.
Oh, really?
From the books.
Cool. At the
Wow. You just want to tell Raina that? Did you have a question? You also had a question, right?
In your books, right here, you came up with like the idea that's so fast. Like, how do you get your ideas running so fast?
So,
a good question.
do you mean the drawing that I'm working on right now?
Yeah.
Well, you guys gave me the idea, so I had a little bit of a cheat sheet for that. But I mean, as far as like figuring out what to draw, how to draw it, I've got a pretty good visual memory, so I look really carefully at things when I'm in a new place. I keep a sketchbook so that I get better at drawing stuff, and over time, you just kind of build those muscles. And I just tried to imagine the scene in my head. But did you see how I sketched it out first? I think that's really important to like show it as a sketch. And this is what's cool about Procreate is you can turn layers on and off. I did it really fast, and if I wasn't happy with it, I could have erased it. But I was happy with it, so I decided to keep going over it. So that's how all of my artwork works, is I build it up in layers.
And did you, like, when someone said washing machine, did you instantly think, I'm going to think about a laundromat and how it's such a pain because you're waiting for the machine?
Yep.
Did you think of the how much longer line at the start?
It just seems like what I
just
would
popped
say.
up? Yeah.
When I was a kid, we had a sign-up sheet in our laundry room.
Yeah.
So you could see like, okay, somebody's doing their laundry until 12:45, so
Right.
I'll come back. But now there is no sheet.
Right.
So you have to just like bring all your clothes in there, and then you're like, oh gosh, another 25 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, so I didn't really like do too much of more of a story than that, but I thought it would be funny to draw a bear sitting on top of a
Right.
washing machine reading a
Right.
magazine.
Let's go a little bit further up to this young woman here. Yes.
How do you draw so good?
I think that's a compliment, so thank you. I've had 41 years of practice. That's how.
Yep.
I just heard a collective whoa
Yeah.
from the audience.
Her and this young woman in the glasses here. Yep.
Is Smile going to be made into a movie?
Ooh.
I heard two questions get yelled. I heard, do you have a favorite Nintendo game?
What's your favorite Nintendo game?
Animal Crossing, is it?
Okay.
Is
all
it
right,
now?
Okay. And
When I was a kid, it was Super Mario Brothers.
oh yeah,
Number
yeah, of
one.
course. And
then
Smile, is Smile going to be made into a movie?
Maybe someday. I don't make movies. And so it's actually not up to me whether it gets made into a movie or not. It's very complicated. Somebody in Hollywood would need to buy the rights. They would have to pay me money for that, and I would have to give them the rights to do that. And then it would probably be like another 10 years before the movie was actually made.
Yeah.
So it's easier for me not to think about it. Like, maybe someday. Wouldn't that be fun?
All right, let's give a grown-up a question.
Yeah.
Right there, yes.
Hi.
Hi. As a parent, I wanted to thank you for helping my early reader become a book lover. It's meant a lot.
Yeah.
And as a question, I'm interested in you talked a little bit about the sort of boom in these graphic novels about, I sort of describe them as like middle grade girls with social problems. But one of the things that I love about these books is that they take the emotional lives of 8, 9, and 10-year-old girls with such care and sensitivity and thoughtfulness. And I'm interested in whether you see that as part of your legacy, or when you think of your own work, do you think of it as the art that is the groundbreaker, or is it the art plus the emotional realism?
I think it's both, and that's what's cool about comics is you really can't separate the writing from the art. And sometimes people try it. Sometimes you've got a comic where one person's doing the writing and another person's doing the art, and that's a whole other interesting thing to talk about. But since I do the two, they're so closely connected, I actually can't separate them. And when I write my comics, this is what they look like. There are words and pictures when they come out of my head and onto the page. It's seamless for me. And I try to write prose, and I'm peppering it with emojis the whole way through. And most of my drawings have at least 2 pictures. Like a sequence is more comfortable for me. So I mean, thank you. That's a really wonderful thing for you to say. I'm super flattered, and I take that role really seriously. I think that it's probably the introspective writing, respecting of children's feelings and the way that humans relate to each other. But I think the art brings it to the reader in a whole different way. So I think being able to see how a character is feeling, as well as reading what's going on in their head, and then picturing yourself in that character's shoes and how you might respond. And then a lot of kids will take that and they'll go and make their own comics. So it's just it just taps into your insides in a way that I can't really think of another medium that does that so well. And I'm amazed that I get to do this for a living, and I love it so much, and I'm so happy that you guys are all here tonight and that you like to read and you want to make stuff and share your smile. Okay, back to drawing bears and washing machines.
All right, now we're not going to get to everyone's question, but we will try, and Raina will be signing books after, I think, right?
Yes, I will.
Yes. Where is the pink hat? I saw a pink hat up there. There's the pink hat. Good that you wore that pink hat. I could see it from up here.
So Raina, how's your sister doing?
Yeah, how's your sister doing?
She's pretty good.
What does she think about her and your books?
Well, she was the first person I showed it to. I showed her the script, and I was like, tell me if you want me to change anything, if you don't remember things the same way that I do. I want to know your perspective on this story. And most of her feedback was like, our brother was way more annoying than you made him. She's like, don't you remember how he would always tap everything and bang stuff and make all that noise? And I was like, you're so right. So I added more annoying
annoyances?
Content, yes.
All right, let's get some from the front. You have a question here? Yep, wait for the microphone.
What was your inspiration?
Just in general? It was the comics that I was reading, but it was also prose books that I read and animated movies that I saw on TV. So some of my favorite books when I was a kid were N.M. Martin's Babysitter's Club books, amazingly. I loved Judy Blume. I loved Beverly Cleary's Ramona series. So I loved realistic fiction. I loved contemporary stories about kids that were my age and that had similar problems as I did. So those were my favorite books. And then I loved watching Disney movies. I loved watching pretty much anything animated I was a fan of. And as soon as I started to read comic strips, it was for better or for worse. It was Calvin and Hobbes. It was Foxtrot. It was Luann. So same thing, realistic fiction about kids who were kind of the same age as me, but then comics.
All right, let's see. Can we get to you there? Let's see. Yeah, let's get a microphone to her. And I think we'll try a grown-up next, if there's any grown-ups.
In many of your stories, how did you remember your friends like you did?
Yeah, how did you remember your friends in a lot of your stories and the things they said and the way they acted?
You don't forget when they're mean to you.
Yeah.
So that's both a good thing and a bad thing. But I don't know. I have a pretty visual memory. I have a lot of memories that are rooted in an image. And I think that's something a lot of cartoonists like to talk about is the image. There's just this one image in your head and you can't get rid of it. And for the start of Smile, when me and my friends are running home from a Girl Scout meeting and I trip and fall and knock out my 2 front teeth, I just could not stop thinking about Kelly's pink sweatshirt. She had this pink sweatshirt on, and that was the thing where she was ahead of me, and I chased after her a little bit, and I grabbed my body, reached forward to grab her hood, and then for some reason, the stumble happened, and I pitched forward and knocked my 2 front teeth against the pavement.
Yeah.
But I remember that visual so clearly, that image of her pink sweatshirt. I don't remember the sweatshirt I was wearing because it was covered in blood, and it was really sad. But then the first thought that went through my head was, how are my hands? Are my hands okay? Because my hands are my most important tool. I'm an artist, I'm a creator, and I draw. And so at 11 years old, to trip and have an accident, and the first thought that goes through your head is, are my hands okay? You never forget that.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, my hands are fine, cool, great. Oh, wait a second, something else is wrong. So I build stories off of memories like those, and I do not remember exactly what my mom and dad would have said right after it happened, but I know my parents, I know them well, so I know the kinds of things that they would have said. And so that's really how it works, is I just sort of start with something very specific, and then I build around it the best that I can do.
Cool. Grown up? Got a grown up in the front row here? Yeah, would you wait for the microphone, please?
So say you were to have a child that is an aspiring artist. What things did your parents do that supported you in that journey, and what things would you encourage parents to do for their children to help continue to push them in that path?
I'm gonna sit now because I'm done with the drawing, so I'll...
Awesome, amazing. Wow.
I'll turn off, I'll show you both the layers again. So I'll turn it off and you can just see the sketchy layer, and there's the layer with the new art, and then I'll turn that one off, and then it leaves you with an inked drawing behind. I'll put them both back on so you guys can see. So, my parents got me a lot of art supplies. I remember going to art classes. I took an art class at the De Young Museum. My parents found this lady who was a painting teacher, and she did I think it was just Saturday art classes in her garage. I wish that there had been more authors that I could have seen when I was a kid. I wish I could have come to something like this and met an author and been able to have a dialogue with them. I think that would have been super cool. So thank you, parents, for bringing your kids tonight. I was given how to make art books, and there are a lot of those out there, but time, that's the biggest gift you can give your kids. Let them be bored.
Yeah.
Don't take them to every single thing
Yeah.
that's available.
You don't need to be on a screen all the time.
That's
I know your
true.
parents say that. By the way, if you get bored because you don't get screen time, just read one of Raina's books or listen to Wow in the World.
Those are, that's,
right?
You got the hearing, you got the
visuals.
you got something going on with your hands.
All right, let's take a couple more quick ones. Oh man, we got so many choices. It's so tough. All right, let's see if we can get you right there with your sitting on your dad's lap with the red shirt. Can you wait for the microphone? It'll come to you. Stand up. Yeah.
The key to coming to a book event is to wear a really recognizable outfit.
I know, guys.
Or like
I'm
a
sorry that
hat.
we can't get to all your questions. I know. But we'll get to them.
What made you want to be a writer?
What made you want to be a writer?
I actually didn't think I could be a writer for a really long time because I have a bad imagination, and all of my thoughts, all of my drawings, all of my feelings are very rooted in reality. And I was like, nobody wants to read a story about my life, so I will never be a writer. But I really liked to write, and my favorite essays to write were the ones that were like, tell us about your summer vacation. And I'd be like, well, let me tell you, fourth grade teacher, what a crazy summer vacation I had. So it took me a long time to wake up to that thing that I was really passionate about being my art form. So I encourage you, if there's something you're really into, it could work out. Like, keep being interested in things. That's really important, I think, is life advice, is just
I
be
think so.
interested in stuff, whatever it is,
All right, we have heard from a lot of girls. How about a question from a boy?
if we can
Right
find one.
in the front here.
Hello.
How long does it take you to like scrape all your memories back in to get like the most out of like a part of your life in one of your books?
About 41 years. Yeah, it depends. I tend to write about 20 years after something has happened to me. So I kept diaries as a kid. I kept a pretty good, memory log of stuff that happened to me, but I feel like it makes for better storytelling, at least for me, to wait a while to like put that story out there. So people often ask, will I write a comic about my adult years or my college years? And I'm like, not quite enough time has passed. I need to see the full experience from a lens of the past. And not everybody does that. I know cartoonists who do journal comics every day, and they write comics about their daily life as they're living things. I've done that too, but for me, it takes quite a while. But the book itself, once I sit down to start writing a book, usually takes me about 2 years.
Wow.
From the time I start doing the thumbnails until the time the book is published.
Wow.
Yeah, so read them twice.
Read them twice and then
Listen to Wow
yes.
in the World. There's
and
a lot
then
of
a new
episodes.
book will come out.
Right. Just
Right?
instantly.
There you go.
As soon as you're done listening to All Guys Archives on npr.org, you'll...
So we only have time for 2 more questions.
2 questions.
I'm sorry, we're not going to get to all
Make
of you
them
guys.
really good questions.
But I promise, friends, that outside some of you may get a chance to ask Raina questions.
Yes.
Let's take 2 more. Right here in the corner, right here.
In the grass. Actually, in the book, you fell on grass.
Wait, what did I find?
Sorry, say that again.
You fell on grass.
You fell on the grass. You fell on the grass in the book. Not on pavement.
When you lost some of the. When
You said you
lost
fell on
your
pavement when you lost your teeth. You fell on grass. Yeah.
It was, my parents are here. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. You want to stand up, Dad, and tell them? Like,
There they are.
Hi, thank you. It was in the middle of the street.
It was in the middle of the street.
And
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I drew it badly, but so it was in the middle of the street, and we had the 17 bus coming by like every 20 minutes or something. So this is so gross. I fell, and when I got up from my fall, 2 teeth were missing. We had 1 tooth, and a tooth is about this long. It's over an inch long because it was the root and everything. The whole thing was lying there. In a pool of blood, and my mom was smart. She knew that the thing you do is to get a cup of milk and put the tooth into the cup of milk to save it. And so she did that, and we were like, where's the other tooth? And there were like 6 of us there, because my family was there, and Kelly's mom was there, and Kelly and Melissa are both with me, and it was like a whole experience. Again, the image, it stays with
Yes.
you. And the bus kept coming by.
Oh man.
And we were like, are we sure the tooth was not on the concrete? And you know how asphalt in the middle of the street, it's like dappled. It's not like
Yeah.
one color. It's
Yeah.
like, there's like white bits and black bits and,
Yeah.
and little rocks and stuff. So we were all convinced that the bus had flattened my tooth. And that was when we realized that the tooth was actually shoved up into my gum.
Oh.
That's where we do the little rim shot, hot drum sound.
Yuck.
But So,
So definitely not grass.
and this is correct, right, Mom and Dad? Yes. Okay.
Definitely not grass.
It's nice to have people to like double check with
Yep,
and
important to be challenged. Okay,
Yeah,
one more question.
one more.
Green shirt right there in the middle. Just wait for a microphone. It's gonna come to
Wait.
you. Where's the microphone?
Microphone's- Oh.
Green shirt. All right,
Oh. Okay.
coming down, coming down.
These are great questions, everybody. But I encourage you to ask yourself some of these questions and then try writing a story answering some of
That's
these
right.
questions.
That's a good idea.
What inspired you to write stories about your life?
Well, I always thought I had a really boring life. Sorry, Mom and Dad. There was nothing interesting about it. I didn't live on a space station. Neither of my parents was a superhero. I mean, like in the classic sense, you're both superheroes in general, but like, I was like, well, no one would ever want to hear about my life. But then stuff kept happening to me. Like I knocked out my 2 front teeth, and then I went on this wacky road trip where, and then our snake got out of our terrarium and got into the car. And so looking back, I realized that all of these really funny things had happened to me and that they were perfect fodder to write stories about. And because I was already writing stories about real kids with real lives, it seemed like truth was stranger than fiction. So it's not that I go around waiting for weird stuff to happen to me, but when it does, even if it's like a tragic, horrible event, I'm like, but if I jot this down, this is really not fun right now, but maybe someday this will make for some good storytelling. So my favorite thing in my books when I'm writing is to make my characters squirm as much as possible. So making young Raina like as uncomfortable and awkward as possible is just delightful for me.
All right, Raina, last question for me. You are in this audience. Let's say you were in this audience and you were 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12, and you're watching your hero, and it's, it's a different author, but you're in there, young Raina Telgemeier. What do you wish you knew when you were a kid that you now know that makes it all easier?
I mean, my heart started pounding when you asked me this question. No one's ever asked me that before, but that's really good. I just would have liked someone to give me like the confidence that they came from wherever they came from. They were also a kid who liked to draw. They were a kid who had ideas for stories, even if they didn't think they could get published. And somehow they got here on this stage. Just like the reassurance that if you stick with something, if you want something badly enough and do it often enough, you too can be here. So that's not really a question, but that like one-to-one connection between somebody who's a little bit older that says, you too can do this, would have meant the world to me.
Yeah.
So
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Hey, friends, Raina Telgemeier, how awesome is she? Right? There is a book signing in the back. After this event, we'll see you back there. Thank you for coming. They're rushing back, Raina. All right.
Thanks, Guy.
It's a stampede.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really nice.